Okay, I need
Some of the things can be affected by our family values. So, how were you raised? Were you raised in a family where spirituality was discussed, looking after yourself physically was discussed? Were you brought up in a house where being talking about mental health was actually not discussed and it was actively discouraged? Those things can affect your mental health. Now, when we're talking about mental illness, we are talking about more serious problems such as schizophrenia or bipolar. But under the umbrella of mental health, we do have stress, anxiety, and depression. So, why should you care if someone you know or someone you've heard of has got mental health problems? Because it can affect all of us. You know, you could be really a happy person, very motivated, and then be affected by something that happens in your life, maybe to your children or to a member, a close member of your family, that really distresses you. And then you begin to understand actually that when someone's suffering with their mental health, sometimes it's not their fault and sometimes they can't help the way they uh, are acting. So you need to start changing the conversation in your family, within your community, around mental health. And it's really common within cultures for poor mental health to be something to be hidden and made taboo. And it really is time to change that. And I want to liken it in the UK. We had in the sort of late part of the 20th century, early part of the 21st century, a real drive to make smoking antisocial, right? And it came from the groundswell of people saying smoking is not good for you, it doesn't help you. And it's that conversation that we all began having with each other in small numbers, one to one, you know, just with our friends, with our family, and just beginning to discuss it and acknowledge that from time to time we all suffer with our mental health. And you can be instrumental in this. So, do you want to be the person who creates change within your family, or do you want to be the person who is continues to be a negative influence and suppresses that conversation? And only you can decide that. So, how can you help people? So, supposing you notice that your wife or your husband or your sister or your brother in law or perhaps your sister in law is not acting the way they normally do. They're normally very outgoing, they're helpful. Perhaps they've been cancelling a lot and not coming to family events or coming onto family Zooms as we're all in lockdown, etc. It's the power of your words that can really help. For yourself, if you imagine, if you say to yourself, I'm stupid, you will feel stupid. That's the power of words. Your brain will accept what you say without any kind of consideration. It will just go, yes, this is what you're saying, so I'm going to behave that way. So, equally, if you're seeing someone who is behaving in a way that they don't normally, start asking, how are you doing today? What's been going on for you? And just listen. Quite often, someone who's anxious needs you to just listen, whether it's because of stress, whether it's because something's happened, whether they're feeling a bit depressed. Don't judge, don't try and give them solutions. That's not your job. Ask and then ask again, because quite often they'll kind of back you off and say, no, no, I'm all right, it's fine. But you want to actually keep asking. And in that asking, as they share their answer with you, their problem with you, they'll begin to understand that it's not such a huge problem. They'll begin to understand that it's possible to change how they're feeling. They might even get some inspiration themselves on how to solve their problem that they have. And if you can relate to their problem that they're having, that's causing the stress, that's causing the anxiety, share it with them. Let them know that they are not alone in experiencing this kind of mental anguish. All right. And finally, if you think that they need help from the professionals, that could be from a counselor, a psychotherapist, could be the GP, you know, antidepressants have their place. You know, if you're a holistic therapist like I am, we're looking at what are the total solution we can offer people. So I have referred clients back to their doctor and said, I think you need some help with some antidepressants. They're not the cure, but they are part of a solution that you can use to help yourself. You can also go to charities. So if you're based in the UK, you have Mind, you have the Mental Health Foundation. So in your communities, if I know we have a worldwide audience today, which is wonderful, what would be really helpful is if you could signpost within your groups, within your communities, if you're struggling, have you thought of contacting these people? If you know someone in the UK who's feeling suicidal, signpost them to the Samaritans. They're a fantastic organisation and they will listen, because listening is the key here, not providing solutions. Let them talk, let them unburden themselves. And because you have chosen to be that person who opens the door rather than shutting down the conversation, what can happen is that you can help someone start to make their own changes. It empowers them. So when I said on the previous slide, who do you want to be? Think about that. Think about who do you want to be within your family, within your community, within your culture. Do you want to be someone who helps create change and brings that taboo around mental health to an end? We all have mental health. We're all people. Let's change that conversation. It's overdue. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my process of helping clients who have anxiety. And I know Umesh very kindly shared my scorecard with you. It's like a quiz, so it's 44 questions. It's completely free to take. Takes about 5 minutes to take, and it's divided into your physical symptoms, your hopes and fears, your relationships, and how you're doing mentally as well. And it's based on the experiences my clients have had, and over the years, what I've understood from what they're experiencing. So what I have understood, and I first began to realize this, was when anxiety is triggered, it's because there's been some kind of significant event in that person's life. And it's about 18 months, but it can be as much as 2 years before the anxiety appears in a way where it's affecting that person's life. So an example would be a bereavement. It can be a divorce. It can be children leaving home to go to university. For some people, that's a devastating thing. And what happens is that the event has created a whole load of emotions which have then not been processed properly. So the grief you felt, the shock you felt, the anger you felt. And that means that your brain has remained on high alert for danger, and it's trying to decide whether it should get ready to fight, get ready to run away, to freeze and stay still, or to fawn. The fawn mode is where your brain thinks, who do I need to be really nice to in order to be safe? And the anxiety symptoms begin to appear over time. They don't just suddenly wake up one morning and you feel like, oh, I can't get out of bed. No, there will have been little signs along the way. You might have become anxious about someone going out, or anxious that someone hasn't phoned you or texted you. So these are some of the things that I've noticed with anxiety. Now, I wanted to show you the areas of the brain, and this is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek image, but the thing you need to understand about your brain is that it's designed to help you survive. That's its core purpose, right? Everything else it does is irrelevant, because if you're dead, it can't process your intellect, your emotions, etc. So it's always designed, it's always thinking, how can I keep you alive? How can I keep you safe? and how can you survive whatever is going on at the moment. So if we take the pandemic at the moment, there's been a lot of fear, and I know a lot of it has settled a little bit and we're all a bit fed up of lockdowns, etc. But if you can think back to a year ago when you were feeling, oh my goodness, what is going on? Our lives are kind of collapsing. We're being locked away. Countries' borders are being shut. We can't reach our friends and family. We're missing out on all these things. Just think about how your brain was reacting, because its first and most crucial role is to keep you alive and help you survive. So it triggered fear in a lot of you, right? That fear then triggered things like an adrenaline response, which triggered behaviors like panic buying, because we've got to have enough food and enough toilet roll. Apparently toilet roll was a problem in the UK and in the US. So you've got to have those things, because otherwise how are you going to survive? Okay, so this really illustrates how your brain needs to keep you alive. For those of you that like chocolate, you'll see at the back of your brain, your occipital lobe is to blame for all your cravings. So I suggest when you feel your cravings coming on, this is completely an aside, just start rubbing it and seeing if that helps. I've not tried it myself. I might try it today just to see how that goes with the chocolate cravings. Okay, so as I said, your brain's designed to keep you alive, and it starts learning from when you're in the womb. Okay, so what was your mum's pregnancy like? Did she have a good pregnancy? Was she surrounded by loving, helpful people? Or was she in a state of distress? Even in the womb, your brain is receiving loads of information. It's receiving the hormone response from your mum and then processing that in your brain. And what it does is it relies on this stored information to determine how to react to the next situation that it thinks is the same as previous situations. So for example, if you think about exam stress, okay, we've all sat exams, we all know how difficult they are. How are exams treated in your family? Are they treated as something that's very high pressure, you must study all the time, you cannot have any time off, and if you fail, the world is going to collapse, right? The world is going to come to an end. If that's the experience your brain has been through and it has processed all that pressure, all that fear, all that anxiety, it will store that. So whenever you have to sit an exam, your brain will remember that and then start reacting in that same way. And so you might endure sleepless nights. You might feel panicked about any future exams. And it's because your brain remembers how you felt as a child about exams. If, on the other hand, you have a household where exams are treated almost as a matter of fact thing, so, well, of course you're going to do well because you've been studying and we're going to help you with a tutor, and it's a very practical approach without any of the high pressure emotive responses from the people around you. Then you'll find when you come to exams, you too have this very practical approach to it and you don't fear exams, and so you don't endure that anxiety and panic. So this is what I mean about your brain learns and then stores the feelings of those situations, and it determines how to react. Now, one thing that's quite forgotten when you have stress, anxiety, and depression is that feeling stressed and feeling anxious are actually normal responses in your body. They are designed by your body to keep you alive. They're the response your mind has, your brain has, when it believes you're in mortal danger. And this stems back from when we lived in caves and we lived in tribes. So when we lived in caves, if you were on your own, so you were alone, you were unlikely to survive, which is why being in a tribe or being in a family, living with people, will give you a better chance of survival. So in the pandemic, where you have lots of people who have been on their own, that has actually affected their ability to survive, and their anxiety will have skyrocketed because our brains remember what it was like to be in a cave. It's not this brain, but we have a cultural memory, and that's also stored in your brain. So if you think about, so your anxiety is there to keep you alive, right? And it's also trying to decide, do I need to run away? Do I need to get away from this situation? So some of you who have been going through the pandemic will have had this really, really strong urge to go on holiday, even though you know you can't go on holiday. And it's because you want to run away. It's just showing up as a holiday, right? So in the UK at the moment, we can't really go away anywhere. And I am desperate for a holiday because I want to, my brain is saying, let's run away from all this stress and tension. Let's go and sit on a beach somewhere in the sunshine and just chill out, and it will all be okay. And we've run away from it. Reality is I can't run away because we're not allowed to go abroad at the moment. But do you see how your brain is using, you know, the situation to stimulate a normal response? What is an abnormal response is if, say, I wanted to go on a holiday and I decided, even though it's illegal, to somehow make my way out of the country and get myself into, you know, another country. That could be considered overkill, and that's over anxiety. So how does anxiety manifest in your thoughts? Okay. So I live with my mother-in-law, for example, and she's the opposite of me. So I'm a very positive person. I can pretty much find the positive in every situation I'm in. Personally, I've quite liked the pandemic because it's given me time back. I've stopped rushing around. I have more time, which means I've had more time to do more cooking. I love cooking. I love feeding people. So for me, that's been a real joy. For me, the pandemic has given me a chance to review my business and some of my business practices and develop new processes and services that I've been launching this year. So for me, the pandemic actually has been a great thing. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, who is a half empty kind of person, she has struggled enormously with it. You know, not being able to do some of the normal things like go to the hairdressers or see her friends. To her, that's a catastrophe. To me, it's like, it's difficult, but it's not a catastrophe, right? So what kind of person, where do your thoughts take you? Do they take you in a positive direction, or do they take you into a negative, more catastrophe based? And have you noticed the repeating thoughts? So repeating thoughts are things like where you're going, I need to go shopping. I need to go shopping. I have to get the food in. If I don't get the food in, this disaster will happen. This will happen. This problem. I have to go shopping. I have to go shopping. I have to go shopping. Those repeating thoughts are often the very first signs of anxiety, and they are basically being triggered by a feeling of being unsafe, a feeling of if I don't do this thing, the world is really going to come to an end. Then do your thoughts make you move, or do they give you inertia, right? When you are really scared by something and your anxiety is peaking, it can create a freeze mode. And by that, I mean you procrastinate. You can't make a decision, you know, and it can be of the simplest things. What would you like to eat tonight? Would you like rice, dal, and sabji, or would you like a chapati or a tepla and dal and, you know, sabji? And you can't make that distinction. You can't make that choice because it feels so overwhelming, and you're worrying about, am I making the right decision, right? Because remember, your brain is trying to survive. When you have anxiety, where it's not the normal response if I need to run away, but you can't make a decision about what you should cook for dinner or eat for dinner, that's when you're having an overreaction to the situation. And procrastination is one of those ways to stop you from making that decision and making a wrong decision. And procrastination also can sometimes lead to you starting lots of tasks, but not finishing any of them, right? So you might think, okay, I've got to get my house tidy, so I'll start in the bathroom, and you start in the bathroom, and you get distracted, and then you go into the bedroom, and then you go in, and you end up with just not having any rooms tidy or clean or the way you want them to. So this is how anxiety can turn up in your thoughts. Now, I love this diagram, okay? Don't get scared by it. When you're anxious, when your body is having an overreaction to the situation it affects all these organs that you can see I've listed on the right-hand side of the screen. your kidneys, your spleen, your liver, your heart, your brain. It affects all of them, okay? On your kidneys sit two small glands called your adrenal glands, and they produce adrenaline and noradrenaline. And adrenaline is the chemical, the hormone in your body that makes you want to run away. All right. It makes you want to sit up and go, what's going on? And makes you look around. Okay. So if you look at the diagram, it says sympathetic nerves at the top, and they're the nerves that help you run away. And on the left is the parasympathetic. And that's when you kind of decide, oh, actually, yes, the pandemic's scary, but I don't need to run away from it. So you begin to relax a bit more and you begin to slow down. And so your heartbeat slows down and then your adrenaline levels drop. And it just starts to you feel better and better. But I want you to think about when you're feeling anxious, look how many of your organs, and these are your main organs, that are affected by your anxiety. So no wonder you can feel like you are nauseous, you're exhausted. Too much adrenaline actually creates exhaustion. Your concentration, memory loss, and you can have poor recall. Again, it's because the adrenaline and your brain are diverting all their resources to you to get ready to run away. Hormonal problems and digestive problems like irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's, they can all be related to long-term anxiety and stress. Skin problems, you know, as an adult, if you suddenly start erupting in eczemas, psoriasis, also things like adult acne, they can be related to anxiety as well. And then the adrenaline that I mentioned just now, that will be connected to the shallow breathing, the very fast heartbeat, and even a panic attack as well. So if you've ever had a panic attack, you will know that it feels like your heart wants to jump out of your chest. You can't breathe. You might be shaking physically. And in some very severe cases, you can either black out or feel like you're having a heart attack. Physically, when you're affected by anxiety, it can also affect your appetite, and you can be prone to binge eating or starving. You just lose your appetite because you're just so anxious, food loses its taste. So I want to just take this thing about how it affects how you behave back to my earlier slides around mental health and that conversation. Because when you're anxious and you're feeling awful, it can make you want to cut off from people and make you withdraw. You might develop new behaviors like checking. You know, you go around your house 3 or 4 times checking, are the windows and doors locked. You might, some people I know develop a thing where they smell their food before they'll eat it. They won't do that. Some people will avoid certain roads and they won't. I know someone, I had a client once who would avoid right turns where possible, because a right turn would give her an anxiety attack. Yeah, and that's quite difficult when you're driving, to avoid a right turn. So she actually had to stop driving herself and start using taxis because she could not, or public transport, because she could not get a right turn. You can develop phobias as well. And underneath those behaviors, there is shame, there is guilt, there is anger directed at yourself. There's embarrassment. You know, why am I behaving like this? I should know better. I should be better than this. And then there's the overwhelm and loneliness of feeling so rotten and not realizing that other people might feel that way at different times. But because you feel so awful inside, it just makes you feel isolated and lonely, because you just cannot think that anyone would feel as awful as you. And this is where I said earlier, conversation comes in. This is where you can start noticing those behaviors in your families and start to say, what's going on for you? How are you today? I noticed you cancelled again. Is everything all right? Do you need to talk? Do you need me just to come and sit with you today? I mean, obviously, bearing in mind pandemic rules, you might have to sit with each other over Zoom, but you can still reach out and talk to someone. So this is where anxiety can really affect your behavior. The other thing emotions do is that they affect your organs, which I spoke about earlier. So, for example, if you know someone who has kidney disease, for example, the negative emotions that affect kidneys is criticism, right? Are you someone who's very critical of yourself and of other people? Do you always see fault in yourself or in other people? And you will find that when you notice this and you understand these connections, you'll start to understand, oh, that's why they seem to have all these bladder problems and kidney problems, right? It's connected. It's not the only reason, but it's connected because we're made up of our energetic self, our mental, our emotional, and our spiritual selves and our physical selves. So it's fear that they're feeling underneath that criticism, fear of not measuring up, fear of not being good enough, fear of not being perfect enough, fear of disappointing people. So rather than experiencing that fear, they go on the offensive and they become hypercritical of everyone, including themselves. So this is how it can affect you. So how do you see your future? Do you feel like the person who's on the left who's feeling gloomy and lost and afraid? Or do you know that things are going to get better for you? Do you know that this feeling of anxiousness, this feeling of loneliness is a temporary thing? If you feel it's not temporary, if you feel it's just stretching out ahead of you and there's just no light to be seen, no sunshine to feel, no happiness to feel, that's when you really need to be seeking help. Okay, whether that's from me or from your doctor or whether it's from a mental health charity, it doesn't really matter. But that's when you need to start receiving help and understanding what has been going on for you. All right. If you feel that you are part of something bigger, but you don't know how to also get out of that feeling of feeling alone, quite often that's about talking. It's about sharing that you feel alone. And it's easy to feel alone in a crowd. It's easy to feel different and because of your experiences and to feel like other people around you can't understand. And it's true, they may not understand your exact experience, but many people have similar experiences, so it allows them to empathize with you. So again, it's about conversation, it's about reaching out, it's about just saying, how are you to each other? Now, I notice in the medical profession that they deal with anxiety with just dealing with the symptoms, which doesn't get rid of your core problem. And I really believe, and I've seen it with my clients, you can live a life that's free of anxiety. I have absolutely no doubt about that. So one of the things that happens when you're anxious is you stop living from your heart and you start living from your head. You're trying to constantly understand the how something's happened, how I can get out of it, how I can change it. You're not feeling into it. You're not feeling the emotions because sometimes those emotions can feel so overwhelming, you can't bear to go near them. So a bereavement is a really good example of this. We've all lost people, parents, siblings, spouses, children even. And the feelings that come with that are just, so overwhelming. There's grief, there's anger. Anger, how could you leave me? How could you leave me alone? How could you leave me unprepared? How could you leave me in such a financial situation? There's grief of this person's been in my life for all my life or most of my life. Now what do I do without them? And that brings sadness in it. There might be jealousy when you see friends and family laughing and acting like their lives are all perfect and you're in this feeling of misery. So your emotions are so overwhelming that you just don't want to feel them anymore. And so you become more logical. But actually part of the work is to go back into your heart. Okay? So the first thing is to understand what is your event that happened about 18 months ago. So if you were anxious as a child, what was happening in your family when you were a very small child or when you were in the womb? You need to talk to your family members. I've got clients who, from a very young age, have been anxious. And when we kind of got them to go and talk to their family members, we found out there'd been a bereavement, like a grandparent had died or someone had died in an unexpected way. It was very traumatic for everyone. But because the child is so young, no one thinks to talk to that child and explain why they're sad. 80% of our communication is non-verbal, 80%, right? So think about when you're a young child, you may not understand through the words that people are sad and upset, but you will know through their non-verbal communication that something's wrong. And when you're a child, you don't have perspective, so you can't process it. As you grow up, do your detective work. Think about if your anxiety appeared when you went to university, was it the beginning of your A levels that started your anxiety? If you're an employee, were you being bullied at work? Is that what triggered your anxiety? So do your detective work. Start listening to your self-talk, okay? What did you say about that event? So I'm going to give you an example. It's one I talk about quite a lot, which is my dad's passing. My dad went on holiday and he didn't come back from it. And it was probably the most profound, shocking thing I've ever experienced. And when he died, my self-talk around that was guilt. I shouldn't have let him go. I should have made sure he stayed. If I had, he'd still be here. That was a lot of my self-talk. And all the guilt did was make me feel really, really bad. It didn't actually change the situation. It didn't change the fact that my dad was no longer with me. It just made me feel completely and utterly rotten. Okay, so this is where your self-talk comes in, and it's where we can start to change that self-talk by gaining perspective about that event. So again, if I look at my dad, I can say that my perspective is my dad was an adult. He made an adult decision. He took the precautions he needed before he went on that holiday. And perhaps it was his time to pass. I may not like that idea, but that might be the reality of it. Okay? And also, when you have perspective about an event, what do you know now that you didn't know then? Okay. What did you know? So supposing you were being bullied by an employer when you were at work, what do you know now about that event? Do you now know that you weren't the only person being bullied? Do you now know that actually after you left that organization, that person went through disciplinary and actually got fired? What do you know? And if you don't know, do you need to go and find out? And the last thing is you have to learn how to self-soothe. So self-soothing is a bit like a baby. You know, when a baby's crying and they stick their thumb in their mouth or they want their dummy, that's self-soothing, okay? So as adults, I'm not suggesting you take up a dummy again, but I am suggesting to you to find things that make you feel better. So for me, I've already mentioned I love cooking. So baking cakes is a self-soothing thing for me. I love baking and I'll go and bake, nothing complicated, but it makes me happy. Watching Star Trek is a self-soothing for me, all right? Or any of those kind of films. Music is a self-soother for many, many people. It can be bhajans, it can be kirtans, it can be Bollywood music. It doesn't really matter. If it makes you feel good, fantastic. Going back to food, the food that someone made you as a child that you love to eat, because the memories associated with that will make you feel better and soothe you again. So an example would be when I was growing up, I spent a brief period of time living in India, and my mum's mum, my dida, used to cook for me and my cousin puri, snow white puri with a aloo sabji. That for me is a really good memory. So if I was feeling like I needed comfort food, that might be something I make for myself. Or I might make khichdi as well. That's another thing that's a real comfort food for me. It has really, really good connotations. For me, khichdi reminds me of monsoon. It reminds me of family lunches around the dinner table. It has lots of really, really good connotations. So how can you self-soothe? Adopting new boundaries and habits. So one of the things about habits is that they are often repeated without you even thinking. All right. So think about, when you sometimes get in your car and you're going from home to work or home to the shop, sometimes you can end up at your destination and go, how did I get here? And you realize that you zoned out. That's a habit. You have a habit of driving that route. But sometimes you need to change those habits in order to change your response. So think about what habits you have that make you feel bad still, that kind of bring home your aloneness still, that make you just think, oh, this is awful, right? Start changing those. You might need to adopt some new boundaries, and that will be about talking to people, and they won't always like that you're sticking up for yourself, but you have to do it for yourself. You need to talk to someone and say, I don't really like this conversation anymore. I need to change the conversation. It might be that you need to say to someone, please, can you not talk about my friend, partner, husband, son, child, whoever, in that way anymore, at least not to me. It's not helpful, right? Now, that other person may react badly, but the thing is, you're doing this for yourself. You don't have to be rude to the other person. You're just sticking up for yourself. You're creating new boundaries that help you feel safe. When you're anxious, you don't feel safe. It's important that you feel safe, okay? Some of those can be really difficult conversations, and I would say rehearse them in your own mind before you start going headlong into a conversation. You might want to rehearse them with someone you trust. So if you have a counselor, that's a good person to rehearse those conversations with. And sometimes it might just be a really spontaneous conversation. But hopefully you'll come away feeling better for having set some new boundaries. Then we've got things like living from your heart. Now, this is perhaps the most challenging thing because of your anxiety, you've kind of moved yourself from here into here. So it's about allowing yourself to trust what your heart feels. It's about allowing yourself to understand that when your heart feels bad, it's actually a signal to you that there's a little bit of inner work you need to do. It's not an opportunity to go outwards. It's an invitation, if you like, to turn inwards. So one of the ways I would recommend is meditating, right? We know the benefits of meditating. We know it helps. So meditate, allow yourself that 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes to go inward. Ask your source, ask your God, your higher self, whoever you believe in, what is going on for me? Why am I feeling this way? And the answers will come. They may not come immediately, but if you persist with your habit, they will come, I promise you. Right? Start doing activities that fill your heart with joy, right? I love a quiz. I really do love a quiz. They get me excited. And to be honest, I love winning, but I also find it hilarious if we lose as a team. And I have recently, we got given a wooden spoon, and I found it absolutely hilarious. But what I noticed was it made my heart sing. That activity, such a simple thing, but it really made me feel happy. So what makes you feel happy? Do more of that. And if you've forgotten what makes you feel happy because you've spent so much time being anxious and depressed and stressed, this is your invitation to start being your own detective. Start trying new things, I'm now in my 50s and I've only just started colouring my hair and I love it. It's bright pink. You can't really see it in the video, but it's bright pink and I love it, and it makes me happy. Other people say, oh, you're a bit old to do that. I don't really mind. It makes my heart sing. It makes me happy. Singing makes me happy. I'm not a fantastic singer, but find things that make you happy and feel your heart sing, and learn to trust that feeling of happiness, because you can be happy again. You're here to live a joyful, abundant life. That's what we're here for. We're human beings. We're here to be. We're here to experience. We're here to enjoy, right? You're not going to get another life like this one. You may come back in another form, but it won't be you. It won't be this person who's on the screen. It'll be a different person. So you want to really make the most of this. And the last thing I'd say is keep a journal of your journey. It can make for very interesting reading, and it can make you understand how far you've come. If I look back to 10 years ago when my dad died and where I am now, the Sunaina from 10 years ago feels so different to the girl I am now, right? I have made so much peace with my dad's passing, and I feel more connected to him in a way that I never thought I would ever feel, after he passed. But I feel him around me. I feel him. I'm looking for a new house. We're in the process of selling and buying. And I feel his energy with me when I go and look at houses, My connection to him hasn't ceased. It's actually changed and got stronger and better and more loving. So if you keep a journal of your journey, you'll then notice how much you overcome. And this actually is one thing I want to say to everyone who has experienced anxiety or depression, is the thing you forget sometimes is how resilient you are, and how brave you are, and how you have persisted where many, many people would have given up, but you haven't. You've kept going, and you need to acknowledge that within yourself as well. So I've just added a few frequently asked questions. Can I ever be happy again? Yes, you can. It's a process. It's not an overnight thing, but it is a process. And the first decision is, I'm ready to change. I want to change. And know that that journey isn't a straight line. It'll be a bit up and down. You'll go forward, then you'll go back, then you might go sideways a little, and then you go forward again. But that's the journey that you're on. But all improvements, all change starts from that first decision of, I'm ready to go. If you haven't already taken my quiz, then I really recommend you do that. And then you can book a free 30-minute complimentary call with me, and we can talk about your results and see if I'm the right person to work with you, or I might signpost you to someone else. I don't take on everybody. I'm not always the right therapist for everyone. So I will signpost you to other people if I think it's relevant. Most of the people I work with take between 3 and 6 months to recover from their anxiety and their depression. And by recover, what I mean is they learn to live a joyful and happy life. And one of my favorite success stories is I had a client who came to me. She's a woman in her 30s. She'd grown up in a house with domestic violence. She was married. She wanted children. She had endometriosis, which is a hormonal illness. And she was worried that her and her husband were going the same route as her parents. We worked together for 12 months, actually, because hers was quite a complicated history. But I'm very pleased to announce she just had her first baby, which the doctors had said she would not be able to do. And she conceived naturally with no additional help. And she's flying now. She has her own little business, she has a job, and she has a baby, and a much happier husband. So do you see, it can work, but you have to start with your decision that you want to change. So this is just a bit of information. If you want to get in touch with me, you can take the quiz and you can book. All right. I see we have a whole load of questions. So Umesh, do you want me to go up to the questions and go through them?
I think, let's see, there are quite a few questions,
Yeah.
Sunaina.
Should we go through?
Okay, so the first question I have is, does anxiety and stress affect blood pressure?
Yes, most definitely. So if you think about it, your blood pressure actually is regulated by your kidneys, okay? If your kidneys are under, so there's a couple of things with blood pressure. I say yes, it's not just anxiety and stress, but it has an effect. Anxiety will often lead to you not eating and drinking enough of the right foods and fluids, okay? So when you're anxious, it's often common to choose tea and coffee, for example, as a comfort, as a way to keep you going, because you get an adrenaline boost. But actually, that puts more pressure on your kidneys. So the number one thing if you had blood pressure is start drinking more water, okay? Secondly, anxiety creates a hormonal and chemical rush in your body where adrenaline, noradrenaline, epinephrine, and norepinephrine are released in the body. So if you have anxiety, your body is in a perpetual state of thinking, should I run away, or should I get ready to fight, or should I freeze, or should I be really nice to the people around me? So yes, it will affect your blood pressure. What you need to do with blood pressure is you need to get walking, right? A 30-minute walk so that your heart is beating a bit faster and you're sweating lightly. Drink lots of water, reduce your salt intake, and also begin to look at how can I embrace life more? How can I enjoy my life more, right? Because blood pressure is also connected to your enjoyment of life.
Thank you for that. I've got another question, and the question is anxiety the same as depression?
No. Depression is like a stage on from anxiety. So often with depression, the feeling of lack of motivation is stronger. The belief that no one can help you is deeper and is harder to shift, and often is associated with this feeling of hopelessness. It's like a really deep hopelessness, like I'm down a deep tunnel or I'm down a deep hole and no one can help me out of it. With depression, you can work just holistically, but you can also find that using antidepressants can be useful as a tool. It can be useful.
Now, what you're saying is anxiety comes first.
Yeah.
And over a period of time, that can
morph into depression.
Yeah.
You kind of know, so quite often anxious people will be quite agitated, for example, whereas a depressed person often isn't. They might just come across as very quiet. They might have become more introverted and withdrawn into themselves. They might be less social, although you can be less social when you're anxiety, but a depressed person becomes particularly unsocial. So they'll decline invitations. They might be very, very tearful. You know, everything sets them off and makes them cry. They might also experience deep fatigue, like really overwhelming exhaustion and fatigue. So they might sleep for very, very long periods of time as well. So those are some of the things that can happen with depression. It is a progression from anxiety, but that period of being anxious before you become depressed can be much shorter depending on the event that's triggered it all.
Thank you for that. Next question I have is, what is your take on the connection between yoga and anxiety, and how will yoga help anxiety?
Okay. So one of the things yoga does, I'm not an expert on yoga, I'm going to say that first of all. However, one of the things that yoga does is it helps the body to lower the adrenaline response. Okay, so first of all, that begins to calm your body, your body. That focus on the breathing, the pranayama, is phenomenal, because when you're anxious, your breathing becomes shallow. When you're doing the pranayama, you're beginning to slow the breath. You're becoming conscious of your breath. You're focused on it. And so it starts to send messages to your brain, actually, everything's all right. And we don't have to worry so much. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in yoga, you're moving very mindfully. Quite often when you're anxious or you're depressed, you don't live in the present moment. You tend to live in the past more, and you can't see a future. When you're very mindfully doing your yoga poses, you are completely and utterly in that present moment. And your brain is getting a rest from thinking about the past. So you're breaking that habit of thinking of the past events, right? So that's another way in which yoga can help. And then there are specific routines that a yoga teacher can teach you that will help you process some of your emotions. Personally, I love Kundalini yoga. It's fantastic for emotional release, and I would recommend you all kind of research that if you feel pulled to yoga.
Thanks for that. I've got another question.
Mm-hmm.
Sunena, what therapies are available on NHS?
So on the NHS, you've got counselling. You have cognitive behavioural therapy. Now, cognitive behavioural therapy, I think, is really good, but it doesn't always deal with the source problem. So it will deal with the symptoms really well, but not the source very well. So that's my only reservation, but it can be a very helpful tool. You've got the antidepressants, obviously, and then sometimes you will get some kind of psychiatric help if you are moving towards kind of more sort of very deep depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. Then there's psychiatric help available on the NHS as well.
Okay, but of course they need to go to the
you need to be
GP,
referred
and
to
then
the GP. Yeah, counselling not always. So it depends on your primary care practice. Some operate a self-refer system to Mind, so you can look at that. Some practices will have a counsellor on site, so you need to speak to your GP and find out about that, or the receptionist.
Okay. I've got one more question, and interesting question. So anxiety, depression, over a period of time, can that lead to dementia?
I'm not aware of any
Is there any
studies. Yeah, I'm not aware of any studies that show that, but my own initial reaction would be, I think there is a link between the two. When you're anxious and depressed, as I said, you're living in the past, right? When you have dementia, you'll notice that one of the symptoms is they can't remember today, but they can clearly remember events from the past. So that, to me, that's a signal that there is a link between them. The other thing that happens with anxiety and depression is you're not stimulating your brain in any way. You're not teaching it new things. You're not reading new stuff. You're kind of frozen mentally. And one of the things we know with dementia is that you need to keep exercising your brain. You need to keep challenging it, helping it learn new things, try new things. So things like Sudoku and crosswords, for example, at a simple level, reading books that challenge you, learning a language, for example, they exercise the brain in a way. Creativity, painting by numbers, all those things, they can create a stimulus within the brain. But when you're anxious and depressed, you don't feel like doing those things. And so your brain becomes stagnant. When you have dementia, your brain is stagnant as well. So I would say yes, but as far as I'm aware, there's no studies to show that link. And I've not heard of any studies along that line
A couple more questions. So I've got
I love
somebody
this
who's, yeah, it's brilliant. I've got someone who's asking, do you work with children as well? Say somebody who's in their teens, would you work with?
Yeah, I have done. I've worked with a few teenagers. So one teenager I had an absent father, and when he turned up, it was a very negative impacting relationship, and created a great deal of distress. And when he turned up, he was often quite horrible to her, would gaslight her, etc. So yes, I've worked with teenagers. That's one type of teenager I've worked with. I've worked with a teenager who was a younger teenager, about 12, 13. He was not doing well at school, and he was really unpopular at school. And part of that was around what was going on at home. With kids, generally, you have to look at the parents and what's going on in the relationships within their family. So it may not be their parents, it might be the relationships between their parents and grandparents, or parents and aunts and uncles, but there'll be a dysfunction within the home as well that needs addressing, because your children are watching how the adults are behaving and what behaviors are being modeled to them. You know, my son is watching me, how I behave with my mother-in-law. I grew up watching how my mum behaved with my grandmother. That set me up to want a great relationship with my mother-in-law. And thankfully, I have a great relationship with her. So hopefully my son, when he marries, he will have a great relationship with his mother-in-law as well. Do you see what I mean? So you're modeling constantly. So with teenagers, I would say it's not just about the teenager. We need to look at what's going on in their family as well.
So there is someone who has specifically asked about working with children, and at the end I will go through the telephone number and the website, and so we'll talk about that.
Okay, yeah. More than happy.
You mentioned a word, gaslighting, and what I want to know is, explain to me what gaslighting is. How do you know that you are being gaslighted? And just a difference in just your opinion.
So the thing about gaslighting is it's pernicious, it's insidious, it affects your confidence. It's a type of behavior that will be, I'm trying to think of saying it in quite a brief way because I'm aware of time. Okay, so an example would be when you're with someone, and I'm going to talk about husband-wife relationships or boyfriend-girlfriend relationships in this instance. So you have a partner who you might say, the sky is blue today. Look out the window and the sky is blue. And they'll say, don't be ridiculous, it's snowing. And you'll be like, no, it's not, it's blue. And they'll be like, no, you're wrong. And what they'll do is they'll take the simplest things and they'll twist it so that you begin to doubt your own thoughts, your own understandings. And what happens is, as a consequence, you begin to lose confidence in your own judgment, your own beliefs, your own decision-making powers. They then extend it from the sky is blue, no, it's snowing, to your choice of friends. And they begin to isolate you from that, your friendships. They might even isolate you from your family. They make you feel stupid. They make you feel inadequate. It's a really pernicious, horrible thing to do to someone. And unfortunately is quite common, right? And it derives from the fact that the person doing the gaslighting feels absolutely rotten about themselves. And it's a type of bullying, if you want, an extreme form of bullying where they've then decided to pick on the person who they should love the most and really destroy that person. And it can lead to suicide. I've heard of stories where it leads to suicide, where that person just can't cope anymore.
Taking control, would you say that? Trying to take control, and then
absolutely, yeah. It's all about control. It's all about control. It's about how can I stop this person from being independent, of having the mind of their own, having friends of their own. I'm going to control what they wear, what they eat, where they go, who they see, if they're allowed to go out, how much money they're going to have, where they're going to live. You know, they leave the person being gaslighted in an incredibly vulnerable position, emotionally, physically, financially, mentally. It's horrible. It's a really horrible thing that can happen.
Okay. And this could potentially lead to anxiety. Could lead to depression.
Yeah. This would lead to anxiety and depression, most definitely. And if you have a partner, a spouse, a partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, actually, and it's very rare I advocate this, but the first step actually is to leave that person, because you cannot change someone else. You can only change yourself, right? They get something out of that power of control. You're taking back control by leaving, right? So if you're a woman, I know that in the UK, there are various organizations that will help you, and I'm happy to pass on the details to you, and Meshun, you can pass them on. In London, for example, there's the Southall Sisters. There's also the Refuge, I think it's called the Women's Refuge. I need to double check the name. But also through your council and through your GP, you can find out details. Now, Generally speaking, it is men who inflict gaslighting on women, which is why I'm mentioning women's organisations. But clearly, it's not a one-way street. You do
Can
find
happen the other way.
gaslight, but it's less common.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got a private message as well from someone saying that she is suffering quite a lot from depression, and she really does need help. So again, you got the telephone number on screen at the moment, but I will right at the end. I will actually go through the telephone numbers, the website, etc.
Yeah. One of the things that might be helpful for this person to know is that when someone works with me, we spend a lot of time talking to understand what has caused the depression. If we get the right cause, it's like unpicking a knot. Once you get to the source of the knot and you start soothing that and unpicking it, the other things fall into place.
Let me just see if there's any other questions. Yes, there is one question, and this probably will be the last question, bearing in mind the time.
Yeah.
What do you understand by, or what can you explain what mental depression is?
What do I mean by mental depression?
Yes.
So depression is an illness of the mind. It's always mental. So by depression, I mean someone who feels hopeless, who feels in deep depression can feel there's no point going on, and so will be contemplating more serious things. They will feel that there is nothing of joy or of value in their life that they can experience or that they can offer as well. They feel very isolated. They'll experience symptoms like exhaustion, apathy, inertia. By inertia, I mean the energy to do anything at all. You know, getting out of bed, it will be an effort. Putting clothes on will be an effort. It might show up in their home as the home becomes less well cared for, they're less clean, their hygiene suffers, because what the depression has done is create this inertia in the brain. Now, in clinical depression, which is where you really need a psychiatrist as well on board, there is often also a chemical imbalance that's happening as well. And that's where antidepressants can really help with that. And a clinical psychiatrist will give you the antidepressants, but they'll also combine it with counselling. So that's how they work.
Okay. I think those are the questions. So Sunaina, your telephone number is 07515 561 514.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to take the quiz on the flyer, if you press on the link, you should get straight into, people should be able to get straight into the link for into the quiz itself. But if you do want to take the quiz, ladies and gents, then the URL is howanxiousareyoufeeling.scoreapp.com. And if you want to book some time with Sunaina, then the website is Feel Good Treatments.
Yeah. Can I just address one last comment, Umesh? Sorry. Someone's just said it's really common for people to give up their medication when they feel better and then they're back to square one. And I just want to say that's because the medication has just helped with the emotional response, hasn't dealt with the source of the problem, right? So that's why I said medication is part of the toolbox. It's not the only tool in the box. All right. Sorry, just felt I needed to address that one.
No, absolutely. I think that was the last question. So I'm glad that you answered that. Sunaina, I think that's it. We don't have any more questions. I'll leave that information on screen for a couple of minutes more whilst people take the details. The telephone number again for Sunaina is 07515 561 514. Apart from that, I would like to say a big thank you to you
Thank you.
for
I've loved it.
coming and doing this presentation, telling us and educating us on depression, on anxiety. I really do appreciate that, Sunena. And also, before we go, I'd like to thank Kirit for his help with this, Kirit and Marina for their help with sorting this out for me as well.
Yeah, thank
I
you
think
to
that's it.
everyone who came. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
I'm always happy to answer questions. So yeah, do get in touch if you have a situation and you want some help, then please do get in touch.
Great. Thanks a lot, Sunena, and we'll catch up later on.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. It's been a very, very, very informative session. I really enjoyed, Sumaya, and some of the questions has been answered. And now I know, sometimes I feel it's the age, you know, when you get to a certain age, I thought it's anxiety, but never feel that, always have confidence in yourself. And I moved to spirituality more now, and it's really helped me as well. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. I'm going to switch off everyone now. Sunena, I'll give you a call later on today.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
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 Hi, Kirit. Hi. Unfortunately, I can't get there at all. I don't know. Okay. Okay. We're trying to do that. I don't know what's happening. Ah, there it is. Okay. And